Welcome everyone to Next Economy Living Intro Question and Answer session by Lyft Economy. My name is Erin Axelrod. I'm a partner and worker owner at Lyft Economy, and I'm calling in from unceded Ohlone territory in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm just going to give a brief arc of the time together, and then I'm going to pass it to Kevin to introduce himself. So you're welcome to share your location in the chat where you're calling in from. And it's so exciting to have you all here. The bulk of our time today is going to be addressing your questions. We have a number that have been pre-seeded when you registered, and then I'm sure things will bubble up. This is being recorded, so it's all being recorded in case you have to drop or leave, and it'll be shared out with everyone who is registered afterwards. And we'll start by doing a bit of an overview of Next Economy Living and why we started this initiative. We're going to hear a testimonial from a current participant, Sarah Ann Clark, who's here today. And we have about over 25 folks who've joined our first cohort. We have our last session coming up where they'll do life design presentations. And then we're opening our second cohort. So we're really excited by the enthusiastic response. So that's sort of the arc of the agenda. We'll just take, 10 minutes or so to intro the Next Economy Living. Then we'll hear from Sarah Ann, and then we'll go straight to your questions. Without further ado, I'll pass to Kevin to introduce himself, and then we'll get into it.
Hi all, I'm Kevin Bayuk, also a worker owner at Lyft Economy. I reside in unceded Coast Miwok territory, just north of the city of San Francisco in a place called Mill Valley. And I'm really excited that you're here and excited to share about Next Economy Living. I'll pass it right back to you, Erin.
Okay. So, hi, Deborah, welcome. I am just going to share a slide here to kick us off. Why Next Economy Living? Boy, are we living in crazy times. And I'm so grateful to all of you for, taking the time out of your busy lives and all the confluence of crises that you could be addressing your attention to right now in the world to ask this question around how do I engage with a community of people to support me right now and to support me living more deeply into my values. So the reason behind Next Economy Living is that we've been running our Next Economy MBA training for since 2016 now. We have 700 alumni. It's an incredible community of change makers that are rethinking the way institutions and organizations are structured to make a difference in our economic systems. And we know our economic systems are racialized capitalism, the wealth chasms, they're perpetuating, essentially the demise of species and, real incredible harm for humans all around the globe. And we need to change our economic systems. So in that MBA training, a portion of that we cover is how the systems in which we meet our needs, right? The personal systems by which we meet our housing needs or our health needs or our needs for entertainment and connection. We actually have to change those institutional structures as well to be able to have more values-aligned ways to ensure that we're retiring in a comfortable, meaningful way into the future. Right now, the best ways we have to retire are sign up for a 401k. Who knows where that money is going to be invested? Who knows what harm it's going to be doing in the meantime? And then, oh, by the way, at 65, pull out that, little piggy bank of capital and use it to spend on the comforts that we need. But there's other ways. And that's what this community of practice is about. Kevin, anything else to add about why we created the training?
It's hard. I'm sure I trust all of you are attuned to this aspiration. I want to live in alignment with my values. I want to make choices that create a world that works for everyone with no one left out while meeting my needs. Um, and yeah, that might mean I want to live more voluntarily simplistic or things like that. And all the things Aaron said, it's just really hard. It's not something that's the information might be out there, right? Then now with on our phones or on the computer, there might be a lot of information about different ways to meet our needs for food, water, shelter, community, all those things. But actually like making that choice or that action to change our habits, behaviors, and norms as individuals is so challenging for a variety of reasons: privilege, positionality, time affluence. I gotta make money to pay rent or pay the mortgage or whatever the case may be. It's so hard to do the things that even if you knew the information. Um, and so having a community of learning, a community of support to navigate together, to hold each other in loving accountability to making different choices or transforming our life design or adding to ideas and information that's scarce and not available in some cases. There's a lot of possibilities and opportunities that could emerge in a community of practice. But more to the why, I would also put it this way: is like there are certainly billions of people in the world today who are living a life that is, say, more voluntarily simplistic or maybe involuntarily simplistic. But there's about 1.5 billion people that, if we continue to meet our needs through the wanton consumption and wasteful ways, not of our own choice or making, but if we continue to do that, it will erode the possibility of a livable future. And that's, we're reaching those limits in our lifetime or in the next few lifetimes as well. So that's the consequences of not transforming culture are self-terminating to humanity. So that's what's at stake. A lot of good reasons, a lot of good reasons to participate in next economy living. Back to you, Aaron.
Kevin, maybe just share a brief intro to yourself and why this particular training, what how it relates to your life, and I'll share that as well. And then I want to ground us in a case story and then pass it to Sarah Ann.
Sure. Yeah, well, I have a background in facilitating learning around things like permaculture. There was a time when, I was younger and naive, and I didn't know how to express myself in the world. And I had friends who were movie makers, and I wanted to make documentaries about what's broken, the social ecological crises in the world. And I was in tech, and I was hiring a bunch of people and making a bunch of money and flying around the country for meetings and investors and all this kind of stuff. And then I had a big moment in my life where I had to make a big change. Left the last company I started, sold my home, sold my car, gave away my possessions, and started learning how to grow food with my hands and build shelter with my hands and harvest the rainwater. And not only did that impact my mental health in a very beneficial way, it transformed how I saw the world, from a series of problems to a complete abundance of opportunities for transforming culture. It didn't make it necessarily that it's going to be easy, but I knew what was possible, whereas before in my life, I didn't even know what was possible. So part of this training for me is to help animate our collective imagination of what's possible by hearing from each other and seeing what we're trying. And we share stories about what other people are doing, and just to even have a lay of the landscape of what could we do. Not that it's easy, not that it's simple, but I believe personally that every single one of us, despite all of our effort and energy, or including all our effort and energy, each of us has a next step to take in all the domains of our life to be more and more deeper in alignment with our values, to contribute to ourselves, the well-being of our families and communities, and the world at large. Over to you, Aaron.
Yeah, and I'll just share about my background. Is like I said, I live in unceded Ohlone territory in the San Francisco Bay Area. I both work for Lift Economy and then I do a whole bunch of community organizing on the side in terms of I'm a part of a cooperative school. And so I do a work exchange for my housing there. We're working on transforming these 80 acres that is owned cooperatively by the school, doing land restoration activities. We do holistic grazing with our sheep, and do a lot of agroforestry and planting trees and ecosystem restoration and stormwater management work there. Um, and then in my Lyft work, I really focus on supporting the entrepreneurs, change makers who are at the forefront of transforming the way we provision human needs, whether that be our clothing systems or our food systems, and do it in a way that actually regenerates and gives back to the ecosystems within which we are intimately connected to. I also have a daughter, and we're trying to raise her. She's 1.5, and we're trying to minimize as much the waste as possible. She's now 1.5 and almost fully potty trained. So we've gone without diapers for many, many months at this point. And so just all of these different strategies, how they come together, but really not getting trapped in the kind of individualistic mindset of like having to take it on as an individual, but rather how do we create systems whereby the diaper industry doesn't have so much sway on, invisibilizing the fact that, lots of kids can come out with using the potty right away and have to, skip over that diaper process, for example. So with that, I do want to share a really exciting case story to sort of ground us in like, yes, this is possible. And many folks might know of Soulfire Farm. I'm going to share a little bit about them, but I want to talk about the Possibility Alliance, which is actually the Possibility Alliance. They're in relationship with Soulfire Farm. But has anybody on the call actually heard about the Possibility Alliance? Just checking if anyone's. I'm not seeing anyone nod. So really interesting model. They actually were started by a couple, Ethan and Sarah Hughes, and they started in Missouri. And the really interesting thing about them is they were able to sustain a population of, I think, like 11 to 15 adults for an annual cost of $9,000 on this land that they lived in together. $9,000 to sustain the food, housing, energy needs of this community of adults. They've actually since moved to Maine, and they've deepened their political analysis. Originally, the intention behind the Possibility Alliance was to say, hey, when we transact with money, we're engaging in empire. We're supporting the war, the militaristic system. How do we get out? How do we get free of the traps of capitalism? And Lift Economy has actually been in conversation recently with this organization, and they've actually moved from Missouri. Part of the reason was actually to deepen in this kind of racial justice and being embedded in a community of practice that 20% of all the donations that they would ever get go to folks like Soulfire Farm. They just facilitated the land transfer to a BIPOC-led land trust right next to them in Maine. And so, but I wanted to share that case story because this is an organization that we're in conversation with about this Next Economy Living training and getting guidance from them around how they've been able to inspire folks to dramatically transform their lives. And B, because it's like this notion, I wanted to ignite your imagination of the possibility that we can actually dramatically reduce our financial overhead, and especially if we can do it in community. And of course, this particular example is a geographic, like a regional community. But our vision for Next Economy Living is that we could also reduce that financial overhead through a virtual community as well, through sharing strategies, tips, tricks. And it's not just about reducing our financial, it's about behavioral change and other things as well. But these are some of the case stories that we sprinkle through the training, and which really animate my imagination and light me up and get me inspired. Um, So I'd love to pass it to Sarah Ann with that and just Sarah, like no holds barred, like tell it like it is. Give the dirt. What has your experience been like? Just would love to hear who you are, why you were interested in joining and how it's landed for you.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, y'all. So I go by Sarah or Sarah Ann, and one of the things that I think is a major takeaway that is similar, I did the Next Economy MBA program as well. And similar to that, I feel like this program, the Next Economy Living, really meets people where you are. So there's kind of multiple entry points. You could be very well established and have a home and have a pretty secure life and are just kind of looking for maybe a next edge. Or you could be someone like me, who my life was turned entirely upside down 9 months ago. I was widowed in a major accident, and my whole future was just like completely unwritten all of a sudden. And so I actually joined this because I got the email in maybe December or January from Aaron about the program. Like, ooh, I think that could be good for me. And it really has been. I signed up before I was actually ready to think about the future, but just starting to like each session focuses on this different slice of our lives. And I was able to just start to get like, okay, there's some more possibilities here. Okay, these are different ways that I could think about my future and think about the way that I live and the way that I operate in the world. Uh, so whether you're feeling pretty secure where you are or you feel like your whole world has been upended in some way, I feel like there's entry points. The other thing that I feel like is really adaptable is how much time and energy investment you have in you. So I was in a space where it's pretty much like just show up to the workshops, to the hour and a half every other week, and just being present at every session possible. And that alone was enough for me to take away a lot from the program. Now, if you have more interest, time, curiosity, every session is just littered with resources of there's all of these and the next steps of plenty of things that you can do deep dives into, like the farm that Aaron just mentioned. It's like, okay, you just got that intro, well, we could spend another hour at least digging into, like, seeing what information's out there and looking into that. So I feel like and then you can be implementing the actions and taking the next steps. So it's pretty flexible and scalable to what energy you have, to what you want to get out of it. I can share a couple things that I took away. So one of the big sessions that was really good for me was on food. And I have for a long time, done different actions like going to farmers markets or having a community supported agriculture kind of subscription and getting food directly from farms. So, I thought like, oh, okay, yeah, I have some of these ideas. Then where it took me next levels was thinking more about foraging and realizing that there is a park at the end of the hill where I was living that has watercress that grows naturally in a spring, and figuring out like, okay, how do you forage watercress? What do I need to know? And incorporating that into my diet. Also starting to explore more indoor food plants. I've been thinking about gardening outside, but what can I cultivate inside? And a big one for me, again, my world being upended, I used to cook all the time with my partner, and we ate really good food and cooked well together. And I know a lot of single people who are like, I just, I eat whatever because it's hard to cook for myself and like want to put the time into it. So I had this kind of narrative in my head that as a newly single person, I might um, eat crappy food, like be too lazy. Um, and in the course of the conversations, like, oh, wait, there's all of these options for community. And what does it look like for me to cook and my friend to cook and us trade some meals so that, I eat some of their leftovers and they eat some of mine? Or Sunday community meals of having a group of friends that come over and maybe we cook together and have some leftovers together, or cooking for myself, but also making extra for the single mom who's living next door and doesn't have time to do that. And could I, contribute to my community that way? So it expanded my sense. One, it was reassuring to me of I can live in my values and eat good food, um, and figure out some specific ways to do that. The session on housing also is important for me. So I don't have a home. I was living nomadically in Latin America, and now I'm um, based out of my parents' house in St. Louis, Missouri, and then couch surfing, staying with friends. And the dominant narrative, even though I've seen alternative ways of living, the dominant narrative still in my head. And like my sister's asking, oh, well, when you get an apartment, blah, blah, blah. And this assumption that the next step for me is getting a place to live by myself. And it's like, no, maybe not. Maybe what I'm doing right now is good for me and good for my parents, and it's good for the connections and staying with friends. As long as I'm not wearing out my welcome, finding ways to engage in reciprocity in my community, maybe that's good for some years. And starting to explore intentional communities and co-housing and just knowing that there's more options than the dominant norm. I could give some more examples. Um, I'll just name a couple others just to like pepper in because I feel like the course does a nice job of a whole range of topics. So for me, I've set new goals around fostering more, developing more practical skills so I can repair more of my things and be more self-sufficient. I'm fostering more in my relationships with the people in my community, talking about kind of crisis response. Like I just had a crisis, I just lived through this, and people showing up for me and having some of those conversations with people are like, who's going to show up for you? What do you need? Where are your gaps in your life so that when something does go off the rails, can I get in touch with your sister, or what does that look like together? Um, and I am curious, even if I continue to be kind of nomadic as I am now, I am looking at options like, okay, can I buy a solar panel that I can set out and have that option so that as I'm traveling, I can generate some of my own power and know that if I can be off grid to some degree. Yeah, I'll stop there. Erin, do you want to prompt anything, or if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to respond.
That was really great. Thank you, Sarah Ann. And I think this is a great segue. If folks on the call have live questions, either for Sarah Ann or for the facilitators, yeah, what's bubbling up from folks that are thinking about joining? Yes, great question. So this question is coming up. All of the sessions are recorded and you can re-listen to them. And it's also just like our MBA, it's a lifetime membership. So once you're in the course, you can come back to any future cohorts at any time, and stay present. You could re-listen to the housing, 5 years from now. Um, and okay, so this other question, I'm looking for community living in Italy. This class will be very beneficial. Very excited to learning from you. Um, yeah, one thing that I am playing with and I would love to talk with folks about is if you have other folks in your bioregion that are interested in joining the class with you, email me. I would love to facilitate making that possible because actually I just talked with Ethan yesterday from the Possibility Alliance, and he was recommending actually that when folks join these courses that they have other connections around them, because this life design can be really hard. It can challenge a lot of the norms. So yeah, so please, by all means, if there's ways that we can connect you to networks we know of in Italy, or if there's ways that we can support you and empowering you to go out and find folks in your town or in your region that you want to take the course with, let us know. So yeah, great question.
Hi, Chrissy here. I'm in Walnut Creek in the Bay Area. Just wondering, if I was interested in the MBA program, if you think it's like better to do the MBA program, and then this, or would it be okay to start this without doing the MBA program? Like, just like what your thoughts are on like how they interconnect.
Sarah, would you be willing to?
Yeah. There's not a, the chicken or the egg, which comes first. You can do both simultaneously. You can do this. I don't think there's any reason to wait for one or the other specifically to order them. I feel like this really is looking at our personal life decisions and all the things that touch our lives and on the more personal level. And the MBA Next Economy Next Economy MBA program is looking more from an organizational lens. And there's some crossover, in some ways, but I think you could do them simultaneously. Yeah.
Yeah, and Chrissy, if there's more context you'd like to share, like, yeah, about your particular circumstance, like we could talk about that. We could also set up a time after this to have a one-on-one, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I have to jump because I have another meeting, but I really wanted to really hear about this. It's something that with everything that is going on, I've been thinking about, about like life, like how do I live more intentionally? So I just feel like, yeah, just like I'm trying to boycott Target and Amazon and, all these little things that, and then trying to also like think about how to share with other people around me because I'm in philanthropy, which is, I get all of the data and the news and all of the graphs and everything, right? But I noticed that, family and friends who are not in this work, who are like, some people are like trying to survive and yeah, I just have these deep questions about how I want to live my life and and so this just really aligned with what I've been thinking about and I want to be with I think it's helpful to, be around other people that are thinking about the same things. And even just Sarah mentioning that, you wanted to learn how to build things and fix things. And yeah, like I want to go back to like old school learning and, and I used to be a teacher too. So in New York and I mean, hands-on learning and growing food and all these things that you just have like really been coming up in my life. And so I appreciate you guys like having a space for this. So yeah, thank you.
I appreciate you so much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the courageousness to reach out and connect with us. I did drop a link in the chat, the Institute of Local Self-Reliance. In addition to boycotting Amazon, which we should all be doing, they're actually working on a movement to sue Amazon for antitrust laws and monopolies. And so there's other collective ways that we can, and that those are the types of strategies and topics that we touch on in the course and what bubbles up from folks and the appetite that people want to make change. And again, thinking about our personal life in the context of collective actions and movement building is really like the lens that we try to hold everything with because we can't do it alone. So thanks for reaching out.
And I could summarize to echo something Kevin said earlier, that this feels to me like the Next Economy Living program is a roadmap that you're getting to engage with in a community of people who are really smart and freaking interesting and doing cool things in the world for figuring out how do we live within our values now for building the life we want now, designing that as well as for our futures.
And thank you for the hard work you're doing within philanthropy, Chrissy. That is not small potatoes. It's a really important place to intervene. And so any way we can support you, we're there for it.
Thank you. I will reach back out and
Yeah.
great to meet you all. Thank you so
Great
much.
to meet you.
Bye.
Does anyone else have a question, a burning question, or just want to share a thought? Please feel free. Keep yourself.
I had a question. Hi, Corinne. Good to see you both, Kevin and Aaron, and thanks for sharing. I guess I'm just curious about, like, for me, I think there might be some chapters or sessions that I want to go deeper on. And I'm just curious about, like, in the hour and a half, I'm sure there's not that much time to go deeper, but are there opportunities maybe outside of class to like connect with other classmates or still like go deeper in community in that way?
Yeah, I could take a stab at answering that. And then I'll pass to Kevin and Sarah Ann. I mean, this really is the second time we'll be launching this cohort. So it's still like a co-creation process. And I would say, the LIFT team is committed to being very responsive to what the needs are that emerge. And so if we want to create special sessions, if we want to invite guest speakers, and get, the lived experience mentorship. Ethan on the call yesterday, he was like, I have 100 mentors that would be absolutely thrilled to mentor participants in the Next Economy Living program. So we can kind of customize it to be adaptive to what is being called for and what you're needing, what kind of support you're needing. And I would say, we didn't do any special sessions in the last cohort. So I would say, like, to the extent that you can bring some of the momentum to be able to inspire us to support you to creating those opportunities, we're game.
Great.
Anything to add to that, Kevin?
I'll underscore that there's like a collaborative, co-creative aspect to it. The self-direction, if there's something that you're like, I recognize, like, okay, say like intentional community housing or something like that, or co-housing, I want to go deeper there. We definitely have the, access to quote unquote the leaders or people who have been working on that field for the last 30 years. So we could bring them to a gathering, a mentorship, or a conversation. And we have, admittedly and humbly, it's a small group so far, the Next Economy Living cohort. Somebody asked in the preceded questions, how big are the cohorts? Cohort 1, technically there's 26 people who are signed up. I would say in practice, on any particular session, it was between 10 and 20 some people who would attend each session. So these are relatively modest sized cohorts. But like Aaron said, we also have, it's now actually 800 alumni in the Next Economy MBA that we could also draw on. So in terms of crafting more community, I feel like Corinne, like 10 years from now, we'll be like, yeah, Next Economy Living, the alumni, it's 1,500 people, and here's the passionate group on that topic that you wanted to go deeper in. And so self-direction and the co-creation is going to be easier. Right now, we're willing to help and figure it out. But some of the stuff that I'm sure will be self-evidently available in the future, it's kind of the ground floor right now. We're still building it up. That's just the reality. But I'm curious if Sarah Ann has anything to add.
I think it could be helpful to describe the flow of the sessions, because that was one thing that entering, it took me a session or two to kind of get like, oh, okay, this is how the flow works. And I could describe that, but one of y'all could. Okay. So each session we start with some sort of like in pairs, checking in and introducing the topic. Because you're in pairs, you can also go off script if that's what you all need for some sort of check-in. And then they do what I might call a lecturette of like some amount of time, 20 minutes or so, of presenting. Here's 9 steps-ish for engaging on this topic, and where you can then find yourself of kind of each step kind of ups the ante of how big of a change we're talking about making. So you might just be like, for the financial session, for example, it's like step one, assess your finances. Like, and that may be where some of us are. And then, at the end, you have like reimagining a future without money. So you can kind of see yourself there. And then we go into breakouts again. And that's where you get a little bit more of a deeper dive. So you're maybe with 3 people and you have at least 15 minutes to dig in together, maybe longer, to talk about where are you in these steps and what is the thing that is calling your attention, and dig in together in conversation. And then we would come back to the whole group and have an opportunity for people sharing out, particularly with a prompt around people might share out just what's on their mind or what is their action they're taking. But there's also space for people to mention if they have any resources in this area, things that they could offer, or if they have any requests. And so that is a great space to then crowdsource for either resources or ideas, but also for help. Like, I would really like to talk to somebody about X, and things can flow from there. I would also say this is a small thing, but it really helped me a lot, is as we were doing that big go around at the end where people were sharing out, Kevin or Aaron would be listening to the person sharing and then summarize in the chat kind of the takeaway of what they shared. And it really helped me stay fully engaged as people were sharing out and help us reinforce any of those requests or offers so that they don't get lost in the mix.
Thanks, Sarah Ann. We have a few awesome questions queued up, but I'm curious if there's any other. Corinne, did that answer your question? Were there any follow-ups to that, or anyone else on the call?
That was really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. Anyone else on the call have a live question? And Tasia, I actually saw your question. I was going to address that next. You had sent in a question in advance, but if anyone else has one that's burning. Okay, if not, I'm gonna put this in the chat. This is from Tasia. How do I reduce my cost of living while also investing in creating the world I want to live in? I feel like this question could be like the headline of why we did this training because it is so profound. And the reality is that no one of us has the answer, and collectively I got a lot of inspiration, and continue to get a lot of inspiration by being in community with folks that are pretty committed to this question. I don't know, Kevin, if you want to share a few examples that resonate with this question or that come up for you, I could share. But I just first wanted to name, like, this is one of the questions. This is one of the questions that we grapple with.
I could even show the radical retirement framework if that would be helpful, because that's kind of the essence of, like you're saying, it's kind of like one of the reasons for creating a learning community. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, maybe while you pull that up, yeah, and then if anyone else wants to riff off of this.
So I'm sharing my screen. I don't know if it's visible to everybody, but and this is like meant to just be a framework, but to help, not, again, like Aaron said, not answer a specific question about a specific action about reducing a specific cost, but more like the domains of life. So one of the problematic natures of the business as usual economy is it kind of says like, what is retirement is like a thing. It's like, okay, the general story is something like, get a good education, which usually means spend a lot of money or go deeply in debt so that you could then have some kind of credential or degree, and then you can get as high a paying job as you possibly can, whether or not that's destroying the planet or not, or harming other people or not, doesn't matter. Make a lot of money, save as much money as you can, in some retirement savings account. It just doesn't matter if that money is destroying the climate or ecosystems or whatever, or harming people. And then if you have enough money when you are unable-bodied or less able-bodied to work, you could then draw off passive income from the money you've saved in retirement to cover your needs. And your needs, the average American, there's no average American, but the average American, if you tried to blend it all together, spends money on housing, electricity, heating and cooling, water, transportation, healthcare, food. These numbers come from this resource, the monthly American retirement budget, which again, there is no average person. So there's 1,000 things wrong with using averages, but the categories are interesting to me. It's like, okay, this is what people ostensibly spend money on. So how do we reduce spending money on these while contributing creatively to the world we live in? So one thing that we look at with this retirement calculator is like, if you were to retire at age 65 and you're planning to live to say 95 or whatever, something like that, you with some modest inflation or whatever and discounting it, you would need to retire with at least $575,000, you know, assuming some Social Security, which is maybe not a good assumption given the craziness of our political environment. But if you were to assume some Social Security kind of income as well, it's like you need a lot of money saved up. So that means that's a very daunting challenge. But what if you could reduce your costs for housing? And again, these are examples of strategies and not prescriptive. And there's 1,000 things wrong with these examples about when they're not accessible because of privilege, positionality, or other reasons. But let's say for that cost of housing, instead of saying, how can I get a job to make as much money to cover my housing needs? What if the question was, how could I invest in some kind of tiny home, co-housing, co-living, land trust, recommon land, the easement, conservation easement situation, buying a tiny home and building it yourself or whatever, where my cost of housing could drop from the average American by say 70%. And I'd also be contributing to helping this beautiful, maybe reclamation of material and inspiring others to live in communities, so being creatively involved in changing the world. And my actual cost of living into the future has gone down. Now, noting it did cost money to get to that reduction in this kind of example, straw person example, but it's an example. Or what if for electricity, heating and cooling, like Sarah mentioned, I use some diversified renewable strategies, solar or other renewables or passives, and that does cost something up front. But what if I could reduce my needs for electricity, heating and cooling by a dramatic percentage so that my cost of living into the future is actually lower? And same with water, same with vehicles, transportation, or health and nutrition, or food. And so for food, the average American is spending money on food, but what if I were able to invest in a home kitchen garden and fruit and nut trees and the knowledge of how to forage and other techniques and strategies? There's a cost to establishing that type of thing, but maybe I could reduce my food costs by 50% or more as I go into older age. So what if the orientation of life was like for the question, how do I reduce my cost of living to as close to zero as possible while developing the infrastructure for a more rich, vibrant, communal, sharing, regenerative kind of lifestyle that can inspire others? And what's the consequence of that is that you could actually maybe retire in a situation where you actually don't need any passive income. In fact, you can actually start to donate and give some of your Social Security away. I'm just saying as an example, again, there's 1,000 problems with this as a prescription, and it's not meant to be a prescription. It's meant to be a model to think about what are the areas of our life and what are the potential strategies. And these are just a few of the thousands of strategies across all these domains that we could do to both reduce our costs, but then to creatively create the infrastructure so it's easier and easier and more accessible for everybody to live in a way that leads to reliable prosperity for all families for all time. And that's something that, you know, is a challenge. And I wish it were, oh, it's so easy, why don't we all just do it? But like, it's not that it's impossible, it is hard though. And that's part of the Next Economy Living opportunity, is like, well, let's get together and make it easier. Well, let's try it on ourselves and find out together. And let's try and make it easier for others, for every generation that follows.
Oh, I'm seeing your little applause there, but to be continued. We'll spend a lot more time responding to this question, and hopefully in the course with some of you. Curious if that prompted any other questions from folks or follow-up or comments. I'd love to hear from folks if so. If not, we've got a few other questions queued up. And yeah, I've found this this kind of calculator framework pretty helpful, especially because our long-term vision with the course is actually that we could create our own mutual aid networks. So let's say somebody in the course that builds a relationship or connection with someone in the course, maybe they don't have the cash capacity to invest themselves. And it's similar to stuff that we do with the Next Egg community as well, which is a community specifically devoted to moving retirement funds out of harmful investments and into Main Street and life-affirming investments. But I potentially there could be relationships that come out of this course that could mitigate some of those challenges of barriers for accessing capital to make those sorts of investments. That would be like a long-term dream of mine for the course, is that we actually build the relationships to support one another and help each other to get free of the traps of capitalism. So I guess there was one, it's not really a question, but there's a comment. It's kind of a question. It's like how to work with and goals to inspire other similar organizations, that is kind of seated as like an intention. And I just wanted to build on that. I think that part of my intention with this course is that it's very much additive to the existing movements of change that you're a part of. So I'm thinking, there's probably regional collective action networks that you are already a part of. And so how to bring some of what we talk about in these courses, in this course, to those existing networks that you're a part of. So just I wanted to build on that comment that was made and preceded around how does this course fit in with the kind of larger movements and other courses, resources, alliances that are out there. We're really seeking to make it additive. And we actually are engaging in a lot of strategic partnership discussions right now to connect with other organizations like The Week in the UK or Shareable in here in the Bay, various kind of permaculture groups and alliances. So so I just wanted to speak to that. Are there any other questions right now? There was another question that was coming up around what about other countries? And so by its very nature of the course, so similar to our Next Economy MBA course, we do have the vast majority of our participants in the MBA course come from so-called US Turtle Island. So I'd say that's like 80%. But we've been very fortunate that there have been a lot of other folks calling in from other countries as well that have really added and deepened the curriculum and the dynamics of that course. And certainly there are some sections of the MBA that are US specific, but the principles are relevant no matter what part of the world you're calling in from. Similarly with Next Economy Living, I think the majority of our participants, especially because we are very aware and cognizant of, I guess, some of the problematic aspects globally around focusing on non-affluent world consumption patterns as opposed to focusing on affluent world consumption patterns. So our real mission and vision is the folks that are in the affluent world are consuming the lion's share of the globe's resources, and we actually really need to attend to that and work on that rigorously, to reduce the load and the inequity, of how we are, participating in the globe. And so that being said, I hold it a very strong responsibility to, learn from and spotlight case stories that are from all around the globe. In fact, you know, some of the best case stories of how to do this are from outside of the US. So being quite mindful of that as we share case stories, and to balance the case stories of folks that have broken through in a US context and done, courageous things like the Possibility Alliance, fulfilling the needs of 15 adults annually and under $10,000 a year. That's an important case story, just as much as, the water harvesting wisdom of Mr. Zephany Phiri in Zimbabwe. Those are case stories that are really important as well to spotlight, and we try to balance it with both. Anything to add to that, Kevin?
I think, yeah, it's definitely, ideally it's a dialectic and a co-learning that those who are involuntarily living simplistic, if you will, simplistic is not the right word, meaning that they're extraordinarily economical and conservative with their resources and consumption per force, not necessarily by choice. It's an involuntary kind of positionality. That there's a tremendous amount of ingenuity and learning that folks in the affluent world who have the opportunity to voluntarily or by intention transform their habits and behaviors, though it's not easy. But to do that, I think there's a lot of learning and sharing that could happen. I think the key that we're trying to be aware of is not to make that relationship exploitative or appropriative, meaning that there is a pattern of affluent world appropriation of life ways and wisdom traditions and knowledge from those who have developed skillfulness around being very economic in their life ways, and so there's sensitivity to that.
Yeah. I see this question around, connectivity to permaculture courses, for example, One Community Global and the Pachamama Alliance. And I know Pachamama Alliance. We have allies that work for them, and we actually have been in conversation with them a little bit about our MBA course, but not yet around Next Economy Living. We're still in sort of this nascent space where, we're just building up, awareness from other organizations about this course. But thank you. I will definitely put them on my list to reach out to. And then One Community Global, same sort of thing. Thank you for sharing that. I have not yet integrated a correspondence with them, but I would love to. We have been talking with Intersectional Environmentalist, which is an amazing organization. And yeah, the Foundation for Intentional Communities as well has been something we've been in conversation with. There's one last question that I feel called to respond to. So this is from someone who's not on the call, but is hoping to review the recording. And the question is how to integrate native wild foods and agroecological crops into our food systems. And, this is such a great example of how the different aspects of our lives overlap with one another, right? This notion that agroecological crops, there's for me, there's like a land justice component of like part of the reason agroecological and native wild foods are not integrated into our food systems is because of the legacy of stolen land and genocide and colonization, of actively marginalizing and disrupting these intact food systems. And so when we think about this question of how to reintegrate, there's both this question of like really, really putting on our mindset of like not doing that individually, but embedding ourselves in solidarity movements that are visibilizing the ways in which those food systems have been disrupted. Anywhere that anyone is calling in from native land, I know for me, that's the oak woodland ecosystems and the really, really sophisticated process of like cultivating oaks and processing oaks into incredibly, a superfood flour. And so, one example could be joining forces with existing indigenous-led groups that are, in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have an incredible institution, the California Indian Museum, that has been led by youth, a project to develop acorn bites and then partner with local landowners to source the acorns and then process them into a food that could then be disseminated within the native community. So that's just scratching the surface, and there's baby steps along the way. But thinking about it as like, okay, how do we collectively turn our attention to these things and build systemic solutions, as well as individual solutions? How do I practice in my own bioregion harvesting acorns that fall on the ground and giving back to the oak trees from which they fell? Learning from communities that have been in right relationship and tending the oaks for many, many years. How do they give back? Is it through song? Is it through applying, wood ash or lime? Is it through just spending more time with the oaks, walking amongst them? Is it through land justice? Is it through, funding Show Me land tax? What are the ways in which I can do personal actions as well as collective? We're at time, and I really want to honor every single moment that you've spent with us. I can stay on the line for a couple more minutes if there are questions that come up. But thank you again so much. We will follow up with all the information you need around, registering for this cohort or just staying in touch with us. Yeah, I think we do have an early bird. It's not going away anytime soon. I think it's till August 15th. So yeah, definitely let us know if any other questions come up or if there's any questions right now. But if anybody needs to drop, totally understand.
Well, thank you so much. See you
Hi,
in class.
Carmela. Great to see you.
I will say that we do have a policy around accessibility. So if you're considering the training, you could consider a few things. So we're very authentic about it. So we've never turned anyone away from any of our trainings for lack of financial capacity to participate. So if the offerings for participation and the tuition fees are inaccessible, please reach out and we can figure out a way to make it workable. Secondly, if you're like not sure it's going to work, it is our intention to do this again, a cohort 3 and so forth. So stay in touch. And if if it's a financial consideration and you're like, I'm not sure it's the right thing for me, we also have policies around never making anybody beholden or obligated if they didn't receive value. So there's I don't know what words to use, a money back guarantee. It sounds so salesy to say those words, but there's if somebody joined and they're like, this didn't work for me, you get a refund. It's all you have to do is ask. It's about we are authentic in our aspiration to create value for people's lives. It's very important for us.
Thank you, Sarah Ann, for coming and sharing your experience. It was
Yeah.
really great to hear. And yeah, keep in touch, folks.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure to be with you today.
Yeah.
Thanks, y'all.
So
Thank you.
Good to see you, Adam.
Yeah, likewise. Crazy times.
Yeah.
Small world.